So the next book in our rotation of reviews for this evening is Dawnshard, the novella that falls between Oathbringer and Rhythm of War in the Stormlight Archive series. And I was not looking forward to this book. As a matter of fact, I said I wasn't going to read it. I was going to let you just fill me in on what I needed to know before going into Rhythm of War, because I had heard that like this was like Lopin's book. Like this was as much Lopin's book as the last novella was Lift's book. Right. And really that couldn't be further from the truth. I mean, definitely there is character development around Lopin, but this is really Rissen's book. This is definitely
Rissen's book.
Yeah, so this takes a character.
He's just along for the ride, essentially.
Yeah, he's kind of like the comic relief or like the side character.
Right.
But I got to say, I wanted to ask you, how do you feel about Lopin before and after reading Dawnshard? Like, do you feel better about him, or do you?
I feel better about him because of, I guess, in the epilogue, he has like what's his name, Julio.
Yeah,
kind of like his cousin just kind of like lets him know that, hey, like your antics and just kind of the way you are a little bit over the top, and it kind of rubs people the wrong way. And, sometimes you can be a little bit blah, blah, all the things that we think about him as a character. Yeah. His cousin's like, hey, this is what all the readers out there think about you, and you need to change. And
that was what I felt like too. I felt like Brandon Sanderson was like really addressing this head on.
Right, exactly. And so like, hopefully, not knowing what Rhythm of War is going to bring, but like we'll see like a newer version of still the comic relief, but not quite as just abrasive. Like, I don't know, like the Goncho thing kind of, I don't know, like,
come on, Goncho.
It's fine, but a little bit overused, sort of like the same thing with Lift and Awesome. Like, kind of like got on me after a while. I was like, come on now.
Like the first time I thought it was cool, but then after like the fifth or sixth time, I'm like, all right, you're kind of overusing it a little bit.
Exactly. But yeah, I mean, not to jump ahead, but I like how he kind of like at the end, kind of like all that coming to realization and the third, whatever it is, spoken thing and all that. I thought that was really done well. I liked his cousin, actually. I liked his Julio's character a lot. I think that they've talked about him before, but probably more of in passing than anything. Well, in the other books,
I all the books blend together for me. I can't tell which one it was, but at some point,
Lopin's got a big family apparently,
a bunch of cousins,
a bunch of cousins that have shown up too. Like
I like how he says in this book too. He's like, your language is silly. You've only got one word for cousins. We have all kinds of words for all the different types of cousins. So his family just made up of just various degrees of cousins.
Well, I mean, if we can just talk about Lopin, you kind of find out that Lopin was not necessarily the most well looked upon family member too, like, and I guess it didn't help once he lost the arm and stuff, but like, he left to his home. I forgot where's the place that he's from. Oh gosh, I can't remember. But anyway, like, you find out that like he kind of left there. You never really got how he got to Bridge 4 before, other than, he was just transferred in and had one arm and all that stuff. But like, you kind of get a little bit of his background, and like that he's trying to, now that he wants to become a radiant, just to kind of show his family too that, hey, I told you I'm not like some loser, one-armed. Right, yeah. I cannot think of what they're called because he wants to make the jokes all the time.
He's Hardazian.
I've got plenty of one-armed Hardazian jokes.
Yeah, I like him better after having read this book. Like, I basically ignored him in the previous books.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I did too.
And I think that his cousin Huion, I think his cousin helps his character, helps flesh out his character. And even some of their moments together where, you know, they're like competing, like, you know, he's like, oh, great. Now you've saved me from a giant Kremlin.
Right.
Like I'm never going to live this down, you know? So I like him better after having read this, and I absolutely hated him before. So if that was the intention of including him in this book, then I think it succeeded to some degree. But I love Risson. Risson, I enjoyed the interlude that she has in the second book, and then she shows up again in Oathbringer, and I think she is such a cool character. And it, you know, the issue she has, she can't use her legs after falling off of the giant shell. We looked it up before the episode so that I wouldn't forget, and I've still forgotten. But I think they're just called giant shells. Great shells.
Great shell.
She falls off the great shell, and then I kind of just thought like, oh, that interlude is just like, that was just a neat story.
You kind of never went back to it either. Like,
right. Yeah. It didn't
like you
seem
never
like,
knew what happened. And then all of a sudden she's back and she's
like right in the heat in Oathbringer. Yeah.
Right.
And then in this book, she's taken over the ship, that she was given by Vestim, and she has these insecurities about being the owner of the ship, but not being respected by the crew. And I really, you know, I didn't realize how much I liked it when I first started reading the book. The first half of the book, I really felt like I'm waiting for something to happen. And then when I got in the latter half and I saw how her character changed and how her relationship, with the captain, Durlwan, yeah. When I saw how her relationship with Durlwan had changed over the course of the book, then I really realized, like, you know, what was in the beginning was like, I did appreciate that, even though I'd read through it pretty quickly and didn't realize that it was building on something. But she was really insecure in the beginning, and there's a lot of like, Risson is really good at understanding people. And yes. I really picked that up from this book, like her understanding that, oh, the captain believed that she was probably going to inherit the ship. And whenever she didn't, I kind of just, you know, stepped into this. It doesn't seem like I'm deserving of it, you know, and
right.
she was able to identify that, and then, you know, still try to find a way to win over the rest of the crew. And she's helping Nickley also win over the crew.
Right.
And
who's her steward.
Yeah. And then Nickley
carries her around, essentially.
And he turns out to be one of the sleepless. So both novellas have the sleepless.
Right.
Both novellas touch on.
And you kind of, in this one, you do like find out more of what they really are.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
They're not just like some, you know, species on Roshar. You know, they are like part of the Cosmere, and they're like protectors of the Cosmere, and like,
they're like somehow just like keepers.
There's a greater
the
story, essentially. Like there's what's happening here, but then there's this even greater story in this Cosmere that's what they're concerned. They don't really care about you know, this whole Voidbringer thing and all this stuff. That's not it's inconsequential to them. Yeah, they're more worried about protecting this Dawnshard that, you know.
I actually think they're so compelling that I wish that they were a bigger part of the Stormlight Archive stories.
And they could be. I mean,
and they could be going forward. Yeah, but
we still own
I fell in love with them whenever we read the I can't think of Lift's novella name right now.
Edge Dancer.
I really thought that was a cool concept in Edge Dancer, so much so that I went and looked up on Copper Mine. I went and looked up the Sleepless, and you know, I'm scared to read anything on this website because I'm afraid I'm gonna get spoiled by so much. But I read a little bit just to kind of understand what they are, and then they dove into it so much in this book that this was the huge selling point for me. Was the fact that it was going to deal with the Sleepless. I think there's such an awesome concept. They have like this hive mind. They are like one thing that's made up of many.
And they can communicate across great distances, like even in real time. So like at the end when
they're kind of having like a council with each other.
Right. Like she's talking and Rizen's talking to Nickley, trying to convince them to let them live. And meanwhile, all the others sleepless are listening through Nickley to what's going on. So like, I mean, that's kind of like, that's a cool concept. Like, and yet at the same time, like I said earlier, like they're still separate. Like Nickley is still his own individual to an extent, even though he shares this hive mind, but it's almost like he can turn it off and turn it on at will.
Yeah.
Like it's not like a constant connection. Because
they're a great villain too, because it's not malice. Like they're
right. Oh, it's a Thanos thing, definitely.
Right. Yeah. It's like their intentions is for the greater good, but if we're following the viewpoint of Risen, and from that level, at that perspective, they seem like this menacing evil.
Right.
But really, if we were to hear the story from their perspective, we may side with them. Like they're such a compelling.
Well, I mean, even Nickley at the end was like, we are more than willing to sacrifice, a few for the greater good of saving billions and trillions or whatever it is, and because that was the whole thing. Her counter argument was like, you say you're for life, but life is all life, not you have to respect even this life here, not But you can't bring the greater good argument into it.
But she makes such a good and again, this goes back to her insecurity at the beginning of the story, but trying to remember how she's learned from Bastem. She had to figure out what it was that they wanted, not what they said they wanted, but what they truly wanted. And what that was to like stop the lie. Like, they've been spending God knows how much time trying to cover up all these different stories of different things.
Right.
And that was like, even if like her point was, even if you kill us here, someone else will come.
Someone else is going to come.
You're just going to have to keep doing this, and there is no end to it.
And by killing us, it's even going to get
bigger, harder.
Because now that's another ship that was sent to this place that everyone disappeared. So they're going to send even more ships next time.
Yeah,
she's like, send more people.
Do you remember the Alethi? They are going to send warships. They're going to send a lot of warships. Like, they're conquerors. And they sent us here, and they're going to come looking for us afterwards.
Right.
So it was such a smart ploy.
And before it gets, and she's, her point is, before it gets past this, at this point in time, right now, we can control the narrative.
Right.
If it gets past this, then the narrative's out of your control. It's what's going to happen is going to happen regardless of what you do. And so, like, she uses that very effectively, and she makes a really good point. And she's also, which the whole Dawnshard thing was a little bit confusing.
Yeah, that was gonna be my next question: is what even is the
Dawnshard? She is the Dawnshard. So. Yeah. Like, they can't kill her. Like, so what I looked up on, I think it was on that same site, was the Dawnshards are like 4 or 5 spoken, like, commands. Those commands were what created the universe.
Oh, right. Yeah. Nickley does mention that. I'm scared to read this article because it's probably full of spoilers, but Nickley does mention that in this book, that it was the commands that were used to create all things.
The Cosmere.
Yeah.
But they only know of this one Dawnshard. And apparently this is, I guess there's like, I can't remember, I looked it up, but there's like whatever different ones. This is like the Mac Daddy one. So like, I guess it was an inscription on the wall, and then somehow she was able to interpret it, and therefore, since she was able to interpret it, it left the wall and is in her now. Is what I mean, like, I don't know if the wall went blank, or like, because I know she says like they look at the wall and they notice something's wrong. But that part I was kind of unsure of, but like, she knows the word, she knows the chant or whatever it is, the incantation. So
I interpreted it essentially the same thing you just said, but it's kind of like in it's kind of like in Arkham Horror where someone's reading something they don't understand, and then because they've read it, they've now like consumed this like ancient evil or something. I think it was different than that because I think it's like I don't think Risson chose it. I think the Dawnshard chose her. Whatever the Dawnshard is, I think that because she in that moment was the right person. She pulled the sword from the stone. You know what I mean? Like she was the right person to look upon this mosaic. And because she did, it chose her, and she consumed it. And then I think Nick Lee could somehow see this, even though the mosaic is still there. I think he could somehow see that this had happened, that it was different than before. You know?
Well, I think she was chosen before that moment too. Was what I got out of it. With Chiri chose her.
Oh, that's a good point. Is
the protector of the Dawnshard.
Yeah.
Like, and you know, they said like Chiri was one of the billion or whatever it is of those creatures to get that big again.
Right. Yeah. So I was gonna say I think it may have been the only one that had gotten that big again because without going to the island, which they couldn't go to until now, they couldn't bond with Luxprin, and they couldn't carry their shells. They would be crushed by their own weight.
Right.
So that was that's an excellent point because in the beginning of the book, they're setting up those seeds where they're talking about how Chiri chose her. She didn't choose Chiri, and then essentially that same thing happens again at the end of the book. Man, I'm liking this book more and more the more I think about it. Kind of a funny story. I kind of spoiled myself a little bit because I was listening to this book instead of reading it, and I fell asleep. And then when I woke up, the Nick Lee reveal was playing out, but I had missed a huge gap between it, so I had to go back and listen to the beginning of the book again, pretending like I didn't know that Nick Lee was gonna turn into Kremlings at one point. But yeah, that's so clever the way they handled that. So the Dawnshard is actually mentioned in The Way of Kings. You know, the little opening things at the beginning of chapters that they do in all of them, but in The Way of Kings in particular, it was like writings. There's a writing about the Dawnshard, and in that writing, it says that like not many people not many other scholars have mentioned this Dawnshard in other writings or something like that. And I was watching someone on YouTube that pointed out that this is probably because the Sleepless was like killing all the people that knew about it. I wonder how much of this stuff was set up before Brandon Sanderson started writing.
Well, what did he do first? He did Mistborn first?
Yes, I believe so. Yeah.
So, I mean,
we need to read Mistborn.
Having never done Mistborn, I wonder how much, because I mean, it's still part of this whole Cosmere. So how much of it kind of bleeds through and is shared between those two universes kind of thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, like, the whole thing with the Sleepless and what she is now, like, I don't know, like, because they were like, you know, I don't guess she's like some kind of warrior, but I feel like she's got something. She has some sort of power.
Yeah.
And this thing has done something to her because I think they didn't say she wasn't herself anymore, but there was the way they phrased it was like, you know, she is more than just risen. She is, you know, she's evolved, for a better word, to something else. And,
I know that. So let's talk about the last scene for a second. So how did you interpret the final scene of the book?
You talking about when
she's drinking tea and she's talking to, I think it's in the epilogue, the last scene of the epilogue.
Right.
And she starts seeing colors more vividly. And I think it's Derlawan that's talking to her. Oh yeah, because she's finally getting that recognition that she'd been looking
she's
for.
Allowed to, you know, do you want to sail the ship or steer the ship or whatever?
All that was so great, man. Like
right.
I'm 100% on board with Risson's story in this book. What did you think? Because I'll tell you what I thought, and I'm sure I'm wrong, just because I've seen rumors on the internet. I've seen stuff on Reddit, so I know I'm wrong.
I mean, like, so obviously she's something else, whatever the Dawnshard is. So like, I kind of like looked up things too.
Okay.
You know, as far as Dawnshards, and you know, as far as in any other things, they haven't found or they don't know where the other ones are.
Hmm.
And so this right now is the only one. So this is the only kind of, I don't know, like frame of reference you have for what the Dawnshards are. It's just what's happening in this book as of now. But I think, like, I don't know that you seem to have hierarchy. So you had, like, what were they? The people that were above the Radiance, the 10 guys.
I know what you're talking about. I can't think of the term.
So like, and then you've got the Stormfather, and you've got the bad guy, which are like, these god type creatures. And I think this Dawnshard was not knowing a whole lot about the Cosmere. I think there's another, like, a creator type god. And I think they even mentioned that god's name in the thing I was looking up. It started with an A, but I can't remember.
It starts with a B.
Was it a B? Okay.
No, I'm making a joke. It's Brandon Sanderson. Because he wrote all these universes. So
But there was, like, this god, and then he
spoke all this into existence. He spoke
these things into existence. And then, like, so I think it's kind of like with Dalinar and the Stormfather. The Stormfather's gone, but he's still got a part of the Stormfather as a Spren, essentially. But the Dawnshard's not a Spren, but I still think it's part of that essence of that god.
I think,
and I think that once it went in her, that it awoke, and maybe because it's, like a carbon-based life form or something. But, like, I think that consciousness is coming awake in her. I think she's seeing, like, kind of like, with vampires, you get bit and you see things, like more vividly, and you all this stuff, you can hear things. Like she's gotten that blood, in essence from that shard, and I think she's evolving into, a master Pokemon kind of thing.
I think that it's something like that. And what's funny about it's so hard to do these reviews. We're behind everyone else that's in the Stormlight Archive fandom.
Right.
And so I'm sure that after we read the fourth book, and then we're no longer scared to read the Copper Mind, and when we can watch, because right now I watch a YouTube video, and at the beginning, if they don't say what book that they're spoiling up to, I don't watch it.
You don't watch it, yeah.
I feel like we're going to go back and we're going to have to re-review all these things with the knowledge that we will have. But sitting where I sit today, having only read up to this and never read Mistborn or any other, this is the only Sanderson series I've ever read, and I've only read up to Dawnshard. I thought, I had a much simpler thought at the end of the book. I thought the Sleepless poisoned her. I thought the final moment of the book was her being poisoned, and she's thinking about how her last thoughts are something like, mundane and boring. I have a feeling that my life is going to be anything but that, and that's basically how the book ends. And I thought, we're left on the cliffhanger of wondering whether she died in that moment or not, if she was poisoned. I thought, because it also talks about how the Sleepless was like one of the little Kremlings was up in the corner of her room.
Right.
And so I thought that, but then I looked something up on Reddit about the ending of Dawnshard, and someone on Reddit pointed out that, like, this is like the symptoms of another form of magic that's in another Cosmere universe. My mind jumps to Mistborn because that's the other most popular one.
Right.
But I haven't read enough. I read literally the first chapter of Mistborn and nothing else. I haven't read enough to understand the vividness of the color and all that kind of stuff. So I think that was dropping a clue to Sanderson fans. But as somebody that hasn't read anything but this, I thought it was like a dramatic ending of whether she was poisoned or not, where you're left wondering whether she was poisoned or not. But I'm sure I'm wrong about that.
Who knows? I mean, they were very adamant about
because
her.
What's to keep them from doing that? They let, and then she gets on the ship and then gets poisoned and dies.
Now they would have to kill off Cord as well.
That's true.
So,
yeah, that's true. That's true.
Which that was kind of cool that she got shard plate.
Yeah, so Cord was the next person on my list I wanted to talk about. I think there's another character that I didn't even. Whenever Rock's family shows up it's in Oathbringer, I think, I really barely cared. I was like, oh, it's great for Rock. I like Rock. I'm glad his family's here, right? I never thought I would care about the character Cord at all, or even remember the name. I mean, I just thought it was a side character that's not going to matter, much like Lopin. And
Right.
man, they really flesh her out too in this book, and I really like her with Risen, and I like that now they have this bond where she's like the guardian of the Dawnshard. Yeah. And she's got shard plate now. Whenever they first went underwater and they follow the luck sprint and they end up in that opening, and then like she like luckily finds shard plate there, I was like, this is a little weird, but it's there because it was the protectors of this thing, and so they didn't realize what they were stumbling into. And I like the imagery of like she had like the pants, like the giant legs on, but like her normal sized body sticking up out of the top. But she's still trying to intimidate Nickley. And she knows so much about, just as Rock did.
Everything.
Yeah,
right.
She knows so much about the Spren. She knows about all these secret pacts with her people and the gods.
And you find out that her family is like
they're
very, very big, important family.
Yeah, she's got some crazy long title.
And so does Rock.
Yeah. This we learn more about those people and about Rock from Dawnshard and Cord, I think, than anything.
Definitely.
And again, it goes back to Rock was saying stuff to Kaladin, but I never knew that any of that stuff was going to be important. And there's just so many things that you're trying to absorb in the first couple books that you don't really know what's going to be a big deal and what's not. And her character and in this story, it kind of draws together like what.
Well, through her, you find out that like, Rock had talked about not being able to fight.
Oh,
and then, he winds up killing Amaram. And now, like, you find out that he's essentially has to go back to where they're from and possibly be executed for doing this,
I forgot that
at
she
the very
talks
worst.
about that. Yeah.
And, or he could be kind of excommunicated as well. Like, I mean, like, and Rock's got another, like, long-ass title, and they've always been like the keepers of that portal to between the Spren world and their world. No, I liked her. I enjoyed her character, and we were talking about earlier. I was saying the Rock people. What I really the vision, and I don't know why, but the vision I got when she jumps in with Risen to the water and swims away was Fiona from Shrek as her orc.
Yeah,
that's what I pictured her like. In like a leather jerkin type thing, like big with like, like.
Because they describe Rock as being so big. I also picture Cord as being real big too. But then she's based on the images of her on the wiki. Yeah, she's not
pretty good.
I just for some reason, I think she's like like Rock with long hair.
But Nickley was trying. Cord was his fall guy as far as he was trying to set it up to make it look like Cord was trying to sabotage the trip, like trying to poison people, like, all these things that had been happening on the ship. Nickley was setting it up to make it look like her. And that was another good thing with the way this book was written and with Risen is like, the whole time Risen's like listening to Nickley, like, that's a good point and all this stuff. And then later you find out that she's been listening, but listening in a different way, like with more of a, hey, this is not right. There's something wrong with the way you are coming to me with all this information.
She's a salesperson. I didn't put that together till just now. Like I've just been thinking about how good she is at reading people, but that would be a skill that you would need to have.
Oh, definitely.
If you were, because I mean, she's basically like a salesperson. She.
I mean, she's a trade master.
Right, exactly.
She's getting the best out of.
She has to be able to read people and find out what motivates them. Yeah,
and she, just from talking to Cord and then from talking to Nickley, she knew instinctively that Cord was not capable of all this stuff that Nickley was trying to make it seem like she was.
Yeah.
And therefore she knew, hey, there's something wrong with Nickley. And, like the whole time, it was a really good setup, like he's like, we need to search her things and we need to find this poison and I'll go do it. And then, he comes back. He's like, aha, I found the poison.
Yeah.
And then you come to find out that they had already searched the day before and just didn't let him know, just to see if he would find something. And like this whole time, it was like this secret setup of Nickley. And I was like, man, that's pretty good. Like you get a Sherlock Holmesy like effect from Risen. And you realize that, she does sell herself short because that was really good. Like, I mean,
she, so there's something from that part of the story. They talk about the grain that had worms in it.
Yeah.
And they ended up telling it to somebody that wanted the worms or something. I can't remember how all that worked out. But at the beginning of Rhythm of War, they also mention that the grain in the castle has worms in it.
I know.
I'm trying to think of what that connection could be.
I don't know.
Something we missed. And this happened because these are events that happened like way in the past. And Risson talks about another time that they bought grain that had worms. I don't know. I'm trying to invent a connection maybe where there's not any, but it just seems odd that stood out to me that it was in.
It did. It kind of stood out to me too. But yeah, I don't know if there was supposed to be a connection or not.
But not just all these worms in this grain, but what's to do with all these radiants in this book? Are we getting way too many radiants at this point? I feel like it's not special anymore.
Well,
everybody's radiant.
Well, that's what I also got from this was like a lot of people like, some of this is confusing too. Cause you had Kaladin.
We're missing something here. It's gotta be.
All these people that were around Kaladin had, gained powers because they were in his
I thought it
vicinity.
Was right. Yeah. I thought it was something to do with him.
And then I think it did, but then at some point, somehow, either I missed it or he kind of glossed over it, was Spren started going out and finding more and more people. And like with Lopen, like he has this Spren in this story, which I don't remember him having a Spren in before.
I don't remember it either.
Like same thing with Huyo. He has a Spren. And whereas before it was, they had these powers because they were in Kaladin's presence, and when Kaladin was gone, they lost those powers. Now they all have Spren. And
yeah, what did we miss?
What did we miss? That I kept thinking that too. I was like, did I forget something? Like, because the whole thing, especially with the Spren we knew of with Seal, and I forgot what Shalon's pattern, yeah. Like they were all like these rebel Spren, or like,
oh yeah, that's right.
They it was a big deal that
they believed in the humans in spite of yeah.
And so that's why there weren't that many, because like they didn't do it anymore. And now there's like all these Sprens that are bonding with humans or whatever. And so like, yeah, maybe, I don't know, maybe once Dalinar did what he did at the end with opening the portal or whatever between the three things.
Yeah, uniting the three realms.
Uniting the three realms. Like maybe the Spren saw that men were worthy of bonding again. Because that was the whole thing. Like none of the Spren wanted to do it because of what happened the first time when they turned on them and basically killed them all.
Yeah.
Like, so I don't know. I mean, that's the only thing I thought of, was that because of what happened with Dalinar, that more Spren decided to take a chance. But yeah, it's weird now. And then like we got to the point where Lopen had already said the first two ideals and was just waiting on the third. And like, I don't know. It seemed like that whole thing was very, very weird.
I definitely missed something, and I'm gonna try to watch some videos on like some recaps of, because we also it feels like it's been a while, even though it really hasn't been that long. We just read another huge book between it, but it feels like I feel like I've been away from this world for a while now. Until reading Dawnshard. I don't
feel like I would have missed something that big. Like,
yeah,
they talked about Spren doing that. I think it was just, and maybe Rhythm of War will feel. Because I mean, this is just kind of like a little snippet.
Yeah.
And I'm assuming I wonder if he wrote Rhythm of War first and then went back and did the novellas later, like, if a lot of times they'll do just to fill stuff in. So he could have written Rhythm of War with information in it, and then when he went back to do
Yeah.
Dawnshard that he just assumes, you've already read all this, so I don't have to fill you in on some of the backstory or whatever.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Because there's like with, we're reading The Dark Tower. There's a book that's like comes between 4 and 5.
Went through the keyhole.
Yeah, which is a completely standalone thing, and you could read it and it would be fine. But he wrote things that you would normally know if you had read the books that came after too, kind of into it.
Yeah,
so I mean, I think that Rhythm of War will probably fill in some of the blanks about what happened immediately after all this the big battle and what happened with all those various characters, and I would hope that they would do that.
Yeah,
this is another 50-something hour long book, so.
So I turned somebody on to The Way of Kings recently, and he's renting it. He's doing the rent audiobook from the library thing.
Yeah,
and he's got to wait on it, and he's got like 6 people ahead of him.
Ooh,
and
it's gonna be like 4 years.
I know. I told him. I said it's like 45 hours long. It's gonna take him a really long time. Like, I wonder how that works for the library for those rentals on the really, really long books. Does it really take like a lot longer? Because they because I think they really do have to like check it back in. That's so weird.
Yeah, they do. That is weird. I've never.
So the last thing before we get out of here, and this is not really Dawnshard related, but we mentioned it before starting the record, is the 5-book arc. So in the opening like letter at the beginning of Dawnshard, Sanderson mentions that he's working on the 5th book, and he's always or maybe at that time, I guess goes back to what we were saying. I don't know if he was working on the 4th or the 5th at the time, but he's always thought of this as being 2 5-book arcs. So that's just
we're coming down to the end. Yeah, I thought we were like
not even halfway
6
through.
Books, right? Well, that's what
How is that going to work?
When at the end of Oathbringer, when they have the big battle and like he does all that stuff, I kept going like, where are they going to go from here?
Yeah,
like,
what could happen after this?
Yeah, I was like, man, we got 6 books left. Like, what are they going to do? Like, we're already fighting the big baddie, and we're on the 3rd book of 10. I was like, wow, like, is this like one of those things like where you think you're battling the big baddie, and then there's another one, and then you think he is the real big baddie, but no, there's like another one. I was like, I hope it's not like that, because that kind of gets, it's kind of like a trope of things, but like,
yeah. And I kind of felt the same thing. I was like, where are they going to get? But I felt that at the end of each book, like I was like, what are they going to do? Like whenever Kaladin became like, he seemed like he was like godlike, and it was like, well, okay, so the next book is just going to be Kaladin's just going to thump whoever the bad guy is, and everything's over. But they kept finding ways of making it so that like, there's a cost to using certain powers. Like it's not like, everything has some sort of like gain and cost, like Kaladin is useless without Stormlight. If Kaladin ends up somewhere with no Stormlight, he's just a dude. You know what I mean?
Right.
He's Bruce Wayne without his bat suit, and so there's ways to still make this interesting if they.
Well, my thought was after reading this was that now that you're introducing the greater Cosmere thing, is that that's kind of like we start setting up in Way of Kings like this big bad god guy that's
Odium,
Odium, that's going to bring the Void Bringers back and destroy this planet and blah blah blah. Well, now with Dawnshard, you find out that these sleepless, and you also find out from Oathbringer that the humans are aliens, and that these sleepless things are aliens too. So it brings in other planets and things like that. So like, I think this is one of those things where he sets you up and he makes you think you have this big bad Odium guy, and he's like the big bad guy. But I think once they finish this off within, which I'm assuming Rhythm of War, I'm assuming it has a lot to do with the chants and all that stuff of the Void Bringers and so I imagine these next 2 books kind of wrap up this adventure on this one planet, but the Dawnshard and thing like that is kind of like opening up this even greater thing.
Mm-hmm.
And so once you're wrapping up, your homeworld storyline, you're opening up this off-world storyline where, like, it's kind of the same thing with the Avengers. You do this stuff, and then because you do it, you alert the greater universe that you're doing these things.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's kind of what's happening here, and especially with Dawnshard, because I think that was the whole purpose of Dawnshard, was to let you know that, hey, there is greater things in this story than just what's on this planet. Like, there's a much bigger, greater story going on. And here's a little snippet. I'm gonna just give you a little bit of taste to it. Then we're gonna wrap it up, and then, like, I don't know if a spaceship shows up in book 6 or so. I mean, whatever. But
I don't know.
I think that's what. And I don't think it's to the extent where they just keep upping a boss. I think it's. I mean, I would hope it's Odium, and then there's some greater,
like literally chapter 1.
Force.
Like, literally chapter 1 of Rhythm of War could be that because of the Everstorm, for some reason, all Stormlight is now the Void Light thing. Like, somehow that gets reversed. And that makes all these characters that we spent 4 books watching become godlike powerful are just people again. Right. That have Spren that they can talk to. And so, like, literally they could change one element of the world and it would reverse everything that's been done so far. So, like, there is, like, a bunch of different ways that there's like, there's no way to figure out what's going to happen next.
No. We could find out where he lives.
We'll go read all of his manuscripts. So
where's the story going?
I'm most excited that we're finally. So we've both already started reading the next book, but I'm not really started yet. I'm excited to finally be caught up with the rest of the fan base. That after we finish this 4th book, we're along the ride with everybody else, and we can join in the speculation, and we won't sound like idiots because we're a book behind.
I mean, we might sound like idiots, but
we'll have a totally different reason for it.
Exactly.
So I'm really excited to get caught up, and the more and more I think about it after reading this book and kind of thinking more and more about what's been happening, and I just don't see, the Hollywood aspect of this. I think it's animated. There's no way they do a live action Stormlight Archive.
It's hard. It'd be hard.
It would be
it really
hard.
Would.
Yeah, and
you'd have to have a huge production, like
unbelievable. Yeah.
Yes.
Like double Marvel level production. But I think if they did animated, they could really do it justice, and I think it would. I think Stormlight Archive fans would like it. The difference would be that I couldn't get my wife to watch it, and I want a live action because I want to be able to tell people, like, oh, those books that I've been talking about and, like, I'm really into, and when you ride in the car with me, I'm listening to, and you don't know what's going on. Well, now there is a blank, and it's starring blank, and you need to go watch it. But I also don't want it to come out and then, like, it be disappointing. And I just don't see how they could do it live action. Like, I don't see how it could even be close.
Right.
Just with all the Spren, you'd basically have to, like, leave most of the Spren stuff out. I just don't see how they could do it and it be.
Yeah, I mean, that would be the biggest challenge. CGI in every frame, essentially. Yeah. I mean, you'd have to have some sort of, and that's one of the things that has bothered me. The one thing that always nags me about not just this, but, like, the entire storyline with the Spren is, like, how would you negotiate with somebody? Let's say, like, you were trying to acquire something, and like
liar Sprens climbing up.
Exactly, like there was a scene in one. I think it was in this where Navani. No, it was in Rhythm of War.
Yeah. Oh.
Or Yeah, and
Oh,
she's
it is in Rhythm
and
of
she
War.
gets angry, and she's like the anger spren are like bubbling around her feet, and I'm like, you would never be able to like.
And it's in Rison talks about how she has to pretend like there's not fear spren climbing around her,
Right.
whenever she's confronting Nickley. Yeah, so it's like it's definitely a part of their social skills.
Somebody be like, "Where you been?" You're like, "Well, I had to go to the bathroom," and then like lice spreads start going everywhere. They're like, "Bullshit!" Like you would never be able to. And the thing is, on the flip side of that is the sprint are the way I'm getting at is like the sprint are just always there doing something, but like in the story, the sprint also conveniently aren't there a lot of times.
Yeah, I
Like,
think
when
they're
things are
attracted to
happening.
it. Yeah, so I think
So like I'm not sure if like every time something happens
Yeah.
you get a sprint.
Yeah.
So that could be the other thing. Like then it's even worse because then you don't know if I lie here, is it going to attract a lie sprint or am I going to be able to get away with it?
I still think
Like-
one of the best quotes of the series is whenever Kaladin is like leaping across that void to save Dalinar, and Dalinar that's in the Way of Kings, and Dalinar's his army is surrounded, and like as this moment is happening, Sin is saying, is a wind spren attracted to the wind, or does the wind spren cause the wind, or whatever?
Right.
And she says, I'm an honor spren. That was like one of the best moments of the. Does she make Kaladin honorable because she's there, or was she just attracted to him because he's an honorable man?
Right.
That's one of the coolest moments of all the books. I still love The Way of Kings. The Way of the Kings is
It is. I mean, yeah.
yeah. Oathbringer's really good too. Though that's my two favorite is because I like Dalinar is like the reason I read these books. Everybody's like all into Kaladin. Dalinar is my character. I love Dalinar.
I like Dalinar too. I like all of them, but like
Yeah.
Kaladin, I like jumping on tangents, but Kaladin and what's his name,
Adolin.
Yeah. Like they're dynamic together.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, me too. All right, let's get out of here. We'll do a whole nother podcast, but we should do check-ins while we're reading because it's so damn long.
I would say we need to do it
check-ins.
sort of like what we did with
Each part.
Wasteland. Is we should figure out how to break this up into maybe 4 or 5 parts. And
I think maybe we could still do regular podcasts like weekly or bi-weekly, but bi-weekly meaning every 2 weeks, either weekly or every 2 weeks, whether we're at a check-in point or not. And then when we're at a check-in point, we do an episode that is just on the check-in. But on the other episodes, we could do literature related news and topics or whatever.
Sure.
You know what I mean? We'll figure that out. Anyway, I gotta end this one. So thanks for watching. And yeah, you can tell we're super pumped to get into to the rest of the series.
Rhythm of War.